Hello students, so today's video is all about reviewing for your final, and your final is broken up into 3 sections. This video is going to cover part 1, which is all about understanding Newton's second law. So for the purposes of section 1, your goal is to be able to analyze data to make and support a claim explaining relationships among force, mass, and acceleration. So in order to do that, you need to do a couple of things. First, that you can identify and explain Newton's second law of motion. Second, you can identify the parts of a CER that claim evidence and reasoning. So if I ask you for evidence, you can identify what good evidence looks like. And then you also can use data and evidence to draw conclusions about relationships. So we're going to start out here with our diagram. So we have a diagram here, and this person is putting force on the box. And a force is a push or a pull. And so when we put force on things, when we push on them, when we pull on them, anytime, forces can cause motion. So anytime something is moving, it means that it is doing so because of some force. So we're going to label our force here F, and you apply a force to an object. And objects have mass. And the mass tells you how much of something that there is. So for this box, we're going to say it has a mass of 4 kilograms. So the mass is equal to 4 kilograms. Now force is exerted on a mass, and that causes objects to move. And they move or accelerate. So they accelerate, and that is changing their speed, or velocity, to be more precise. So it changes its velocity. So if it starts out with a velocity of 0, and you apply a force to it, now it is going to increase its velocity, it's going to accelerate, and we see that change. So our person here is putting a force on the box, and that causes it to accelerate because it has mass. So Sir Isaac Newton came up with this law, which is his second law of motion, and he said that force is equal to mass times acceleration. So for any object, if you know how much force you're putting on it and you know how much mass, you can find the acceleration, or if you know how much force and how much acceleration, you can find the mass, or more commonly, if you know the mass and the acceleration, then you can find the force. So let's give ourselves a little bit more space here, just a second. So we have our Newton's second law of motion. And so we can do some arrow math to figure out, what if I put a really big force, a huge force, and this object has a small mass? How much acceleration? So if we have a big force and a small mass, what's the acceleration going to look like? Well, we can do arrow math and know that if we have a small mass and it's staying constant the whole time, and we have a big force, that means that we're going to have a big acceleration as well. There is a direct relationship between force and acceleration, because adding force will increase the acceleration. Decreasing force will decrease the acceleration. But we also could use this example to think about, if we have a big force on a small mass, it's going to have a lot of acceleration. So using that information, using that direct relationship, what if we have some different things? Okay, what if we are using a constant force and we add mass what's going to happen to our acceleration? Okay, what is going to happen to our acceleration? Well, let's set up for our arrow math this way. F equals m times a, Newton's second law, force is mass times acceleration. So we have a constant force, and we increase our mass. Adding mass to something that is larger is harder to move. It's harder to accelerate. So that means that increasing something's mass will decrease its acceleration. This is an inverse relationship between mass and acceleration when force is constant, because adding mass decreases acceleration, or decreasing mass will increase acceleration, but they're going to do opposite things. And with a direct relationship, adding force adds acceleration, and they do the same thing. So all in all, Newton's second law tells us about how objects move, how we can increase the speed on something if we add force, or how if we add mass, it's harder to move an object. So this has been a very, very quick review of Newton's second law of motion. If you're still wanting to review more, I highly recommend you look back at our week 5 reading for meanings. Thanks for watching.